So yesterday I did a video talking about the layoffs that Warner Media were going to be handing out. And I did a lot of speculation on what was going to happen with DC Comics. And then like 3 hours later, the axe came down hard for DC Comics. We're going to talk about that because there's actually a lot to talk about and discuss, because I think the future of DC Comics is actually kind of bright now. It appears that DC Comics is actually going to be ran like a real business now. So petty FU covers like this one, this Wonder Woman 1984 trash that's not going to sell, that nobody wants, which was a terrible idea. Petty stuff like this, gone. And let's be clear, the only reason this comic cover exists is that it's an FU to fans. That's not how you run a business. That's not how businesses run. Businesses usually run where they want the customers to feel happy and they want customers to keep coming back. This old guard of, comics are ours now, boys, like all these weirdos. I think you're going to start to see some changes in that aspect. The rot has got to get removed if this industry is ever going to get healed. It's just a fact. It's just a fact. And you're seeing a lot of that right here. So a lot of old guard has been removed from DC Comics, and they're going to move in some of their new guys. Now, the one name on here that really comes to mind, I think, is a really good example of some people that shouldn't be there anymore, is Andy Corey, this DC editor. Listen, okay, now a lot of people, you keep these people's jobs. These people, a lot of them, should have been fired a long time ago. This because it's a perfect example to why they don't run the comic book industry like a real business. It's just a big hangout for people. Andy Corey tanked an entire line of comic books at DC Comics. DC Vertigo, a very prestigious brand. A lot of really big name comics have come from there. A lot of really great loved properties have come from Vertigo. DC Comics a while ago decided, we're going to bring Vertigo back. We're going to bring it back. Andy Corey, my man, you're going to run it, Andy. You're going to be the face of Vertigo. And what did he do? He ran it into the ground. Every single book was super, super woke. He brought in people like Zoe Quinn and a lot of other toxic people. And it was really funny. I'll never forget. After like a couple of weeks after the announcement and everyone was announced, it was the people that he brought in to write and draw the comics wasted no time attacking fans, being nasty, and just doing some nasty stuff. It was just funny. They wasted no time crapping on the fans. And sure enough, Vertigo was destroyed, ran into the ground, and then said, okay, Andy Corey, next up, here's some Black Label books. It didn't make any sense. Okay, it was a really good example of failing upwards in comics. Oh, you trashed a whole line? That's okay. We're going to move you over. You be editor of a new line. That's not how it works in business. Okay, Bob Harris, editor-in-chief, obviously overseeing a lot of terrible, terrible decisions. He's got to go. This is just the business world. In some ways, I'd like to welcome DC Comics to the real business world. You're actually going to get ran like a business now, which means maybe, just maybe, you'll start putting out products that are really good, not 100 issues of Batman by Tom King, letting Brian Michael Bendis run a bunch of titles into the ground, letting Andy Corey fail his way to the top. That was the biggest one. I can't believe they kept him after he crashed DC Vertigo. That I'll never understand it. Hey, you crashed and destroyed an iconic line. Promotion for you, son. And the dude's social media is nasty. Oh, his social media is nasty. Everything is about the Orange Man. Nothing about comics, really. Unless he's trashing fans. You know, calling the ones that don't like his decision making trolls. Stuff like that. I hope that sets a nice tone. You know, hey, you're not going to be allowed to crap on fans anymore. We want to make money over here at DC Comics. So big changes. The editing line was gutted. A lot of stuff is getting condensed or eliminated. DC Universe being one of the one of the things removed. You can go over here, DC Comics, DC Universe doomed, massive layoffs and changes. Cosmic Book News actually made a nice little condensed article here taking all the reports because there was some stuff from the Hollywood Reporter. There was stuff from Bleeding Cool, and they kind of condensed everything. So here's what's going to happen. Massive layoffs at DC Comics. Obviously, we just went over that. Finally, there's some accountability. If you don't produce, it looks like you're going to be removed, which is how a real business. It's how a real business works. Imagine that. You can no longer crash an entire line of comic books and say, "Well, I'll have my job tomorrow. It'll be okay. It'll be okay." No, it won't be okay. It won't be okay. The one thing I do like is that Jim Lee is going to remain in a good role here, but I think as publisher, Jim Lee is a bad pick. But as chief creative officer, I think he's a good pick. So he's staying in that role, but publisher's going elsewhere. It says he's going to transition out of that role, according to Bleeding Cool. I think that's a good idea, actually. Him as CCO, though, I think is good. He's staying there. You don't want to lose Jim Lee anyway. That would actually be a bad loss for them. But of a lot of other changes happening, a lot of old guard people are gone, and they're going to bring in some new people. And I hope they clean house, man. And I hope that they get these toxic freelancers that are running around telling customers they're utter garbage and trash. I hope that changes. That needs to change. DC Universe is done for. And this shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. It's really just unnecessary. You don't need it. You have HBO Max. It didn't make any sense for DC Universe to exist with HBO Max. They've already begun moving all of those originals over to HBO Max. I've been watching Doom Patrol on HBO Max. I guess Harley Quinn is over there. I would imagine Titans is going to come over there soon, and the Young Justice animated series is probably going to move over there as well. DC Direct is closing. Shouldn't be a big surprise. That's probably going to be licensed out to Hasbro or Mattel. McFarlane Toys is already creating the DC Multiverse line. So this isn't a big shocker as well. I don't really know how much money they were bringing in. It probably wasn't enough to sustain it. And then here's the big one. DC Comics further cutting the line. Bleeding Cool also offers all the layers will have an immediate effect on the publication of DC Comics monthly titles, where a rapid reduction of titles is expected. Similar to previous comments made by Van Sciver, the rumor says that the popular characters will stick around, such as Batman, Superman, and Justice League, adding that the digital line and the original graphic novel line will stick around, while a lot of comics will disappear because there aren't enough people left at DC Comics to work on them. It's also suggested the Bat family of titles could get a big boost, as obviously Batman sells, which sees BC note, if you thought DC Comics published an unhealthy percentage of Batman books, you ain't seen nothing yet. Now, I know Ethan has talked about this. I've talked about this as well. I've heard from some people that I don't even know if they talked to Ethan that have said the same thing. This is what I've heard for a while, and I've talked about this, and I talked about it yesterday. You're going to see a drastic reduction in the number of books that DC Comics puts out. Periodicals are on their way out. That's probably the entire industry. They don't make a lot of money selling floppies. It doesn't mean that DC Comics is going to end. I don't think DC Comics is coming to an end. I think that they're just going to get ran like a business now. So digital comics, sticking around. You're going to see a big reduction in books. Probably the Trinity will remain and a few others. But, you know, having all these different books running around that don't sell, that's done with. And all you have to do is go back to January 2020 Comic-Con sale numbers, right? Let's take a look at what's going on here as far as sales with DC Comics. Now, this Wonder Woman there, this is kind of a fluke. This was a special issue, 750, sold 167 copies, 167,000 in copies. This is the only time Wonder Woman is on the top charts for like months. But let's just give it to them, right? In the top 10, what do we have here? We have one issue of Batman and Wonder Woman. The rest is all Marvel books. Okay, we come down here, and then we have Batman again at 11. Number 12, Batman Curse of the White Knight. And we keep going down and down and down. Oh, here's Joker and Harley. Here's Detective Comics. We keep going down. Superman, finally, at 34. Batman, Superman, Detective Comics Annual, Detective Comics. Okay, once we hit number 38, we start seeing more DC books. The DC books aren't doing well. Now, compared to the Marvel books are at least up here. DC Comics, their floppies aren't doing very well. And that has a lot to do with editorial and decision makings that get made at the top, what gets approved, whatever. My point is they're going to move to graphic novels, scholastic stuff, and bookstores are the future. They're going to do digital comics still, but for the most part, you are going to see that line cut drastically. It's going to be shocking, I think, to a lot of people how reduced the DC Comics line is going to be. That's what I've heard from two different people, and I don't think they know each other. And everything they've told me has kind of come true in the past 2 days. I've been waiting for it to happen, and it looks like it's going to happen a lot sooner than I thought it would be. I thought by the end of the year, and they were going to slowly cut. I think it's going to be immediate, just like Bleeding Cool is saying. So, it's going to be a crazy ride, but it's like it says here, it's all about HBO Max, man. That's the big reason that AT&T wanted them, is for that streaming service. They want DC Comics. The brand is strong, and it makes money. Okay? So I want to be clear. I'm not saying that DC Comics is closing, but they're for sure changing. They're going to get ran like a business. And I think that's a good thing. I don't want I don't want DC Comics to fold. I like a lot of these characters. What I want is for them to be successful. I'm okay with buying graphic novels over periodicals. That's not a big deal to me. I'll pick up a graphic novel every once in a while as long as it's good. It'll be different having so few periodicals, but a lot of people weren't buying them anyway. I just showed you a list, and that's January 2020. I picked that because that's when the comic book industry was still kicking on all cylinders. More recent ones, they're kind of still just now finally coming back to life. I wanted something more representative of when things were actually moving good. So, what's the future for DC Comics? I think it can possibly get a little brighter if they actually run it like it should be. Stop letting people fail upward, right? Andy Corey, he should have been fired after he crashed Vertigo, okay? When he crashed Vertigo Comics, that guy should have been fired. That was a really good example of failing upward. Oh, it's okay. You can destroy an entire line of comics. Cool. Don't worry about it, Andy. Don't worry about that. So, change is coming. I think change is good. Something's got to change. Something has got to change. And it looks like AT&T is finally going to change the business mentality of comic books. And it's been a long time coming. Anyway, thanks for watching. Let me know what you guys think about all this. What are your thoughts? Do you think that AT&T can save DC Comics? Do you think they can manage to keep these characters going? I'd like to hear what you guys have to say. Also, if you would, please consider throwing a like up, sharing the video. Make sure you still subscribe. Subscribe if you're new. Hit that notification bell, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace. Also, if you want to help support the channel, check out my Teespring store. There's a link in the description. You can find some merchandise in there that you might want to check out.